just 98 days to the Iowa caucus, and Senator Bernie Sanders has more commitments than he had in January of 2016. And also, Congresswoman Katie Hill resigns.
Team Rising is here to break it all down. Niambi Carter, she's an assistant professor of political science at Howard University, author of An American While Black, African Americans, Immigration, and the Limits of Citizenship. Emily Jashinsky is a culture editor at The Federalist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I think my brain is still recovering from the weekend. Sorry.
Yeah, no, mine is too, trust me. All right.
It's a real Monday in here, guys.
I'm coated in barbecue sauce. So we're talking a little bit, we got 98 days to get to Iowa. Very interesting new tidbit here from the Bernie Sanders campaign that as of today, they've collected more commitments to caucus for Bernie Sanders than they did in January of 2016. This, of course, I mean, could basically Bernie is polling around the fourth place number within Iowa. We've got 100 days more to go. Emily, I mean, really though, if he could place in that second place, if he could place in the 2 or the 3, it really would defy a lot of the expectations I think that the media is set here.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I don't trust the media to cover Bernie Sanders' campaign very well in the same way I don't trust the media to cover Donald Trump's campaign, specifically in a state like Iowa. That said, I mean, 100 days sounds like a short amount of time. It's really a long amount of time when you have Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren kind of jockeying. Elizabeth Warren doing so well means I don't think Bernie Sanders is probably going to be able to do as well in Iowa as that he may have in the past if she didn't have the support that she had in Iowa, and she has the momentum in Iowa right now, which I think makes it tough.
Yeah, I thought that nugget from the campaign was really interesting, though, and I mean the caveat is that in 2016 the Bernie Sanders campaign was not particularly well organized, right? It was the plane was being built as it was, going down the runway.
Let's put it nice.
That was right.
But it came very close in Iowa, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, even though they were disorganized and they weren't as
right.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, it was like negligible points that separated him from Hillary Clinton. So I think they've learned from that. And they've since gotten more organized. They've put out the call. I mean, they are trying to get the ground game going in Iowa. So, I mean, anything can happen, but I think he's definitely learned from his last go-round.
That is part of what's so important in Iowa is you have to have people organized and actually go and know what the caucus rules are and how that all goes down. And then you also have this situation. Let's go ahead and throw up the, I think we have the Real Clear Politics average of polls in Iowa right now. This is basically where things stand. You've essentially got a 4-person race. Everyone else is really down in 3%. I mean, Kamala at this point, average it. This is not one poll, just to be clear. This is the average of polls, and you've got Kamala down at 3%. So you're looking at a 4-person race here, and if you don't meet that 15% threshold in any given caucus room, then your supporters have to go and pick another candidate. So those dynamics at play too are part, Emily, of what makes Iowa so hard to predict.
Right, it's completely unique, and I would say that 13% for Bernie Sanders is 10 points out from the front runner. 23% is what Elizabeth Warren was. That's actually not that big of a gap. It's not Kamala Harris having to go from 3% to 23%. 100 days, I mean, compared to the fact that we've been covering this campaign already for a year and a half, it sounds like a short amount of time. It really isn't. To close a gap like that, there are more debates. So, I mean, it's not impossible at all, and he does understand the landscape of the Iowa caucus.
And that's the thing, too, Niambi, which is that
Didn't Kamala go all in on Iowa?
She did go all in on Iowa. She said she was like, I'm going to move to Iowa. And it didn't work. I mean, that's the thing is that with Bernie, I mean, his entire strategy is basically to drive people out who don't vote, who are not traditional voters. But at the same time, look, Iowa is a very, very white state. That is not necessarily what Bernie's, who his main coalition is. He's actually got quite a bit of Latino, African-American support, more so than any other candidate, I believe, than Joe Biden. So it's not a great representation of where the Democratic race stands, like as a whole.
Absolutely. But it sends a signal. And I think that's what people want. They want to build that momentum early because then you have Super Tuesday coming right behind it. And you want to say that I'm the winner, right? This place has chosen me. And I think what makes Iowa interesting is that it's such a high bar, right? I mean, these folks who come out to the caucus have to be committed because it's not going to be a quick process. You're going to be here for hours out of your day and you have to talk and you have to negotiate, right? And so I think that's why Iowa is so powerful, even though Iowa does not look like the rest of the United States. I don't think anybody would suggest they are indicative of what the average Democratic voter looks like. But it is an important way to sort of set the scene, right? And make the claim that if you can win in a place like Iowa, then maybe you can do South Carolina. Maybe you can take Nevada. Nevada. Maybe you can take California, because these folks have come out and done this for you in ways that other states don't have to. If
well,
you just
and
have
that's why when you look at 3% for Kamala, why it's so devastating, because her team had always made like the Barack Obama case.
Yes.
You get Iowa and New Hampshire, and then people jump on board, right? Then you win South Carolina. And so if you are standing at 3% and basically not even placing an Iowa, I mean, that's a game ender right there. At the same time, we have news out of Congress. Congresswoman Katie Hill has resigned after allegations emerged of her having an affair with a campaign staffer and also a member of her office there in Congress. Red State and also a news outlet, I think the Daily Mail was it, published nude photos of her, Niambi, which, look, I'm just going to put my cards on the table here. I think that abusive, like that any news outlet would publish these photos to try to shame a woman like that, I think is horrible. I think it's abusive. It appears that her ex-husband was behind it. I'm not saying it's okay to have an affair with a staffer. From everything we know, this was a consensual relationship, but here you have a woman who, has sex and 2 weeks later she's gone, while how many male offenders do you have still in the house? No one ever resigns on that side, and there we are.
Well, I mean, it's a few things. I mean, I think the relationship with her staffer is a separate issue from the nude pictures. Unfortunately, they came out together. And I think it's a violation. I think we should all be concerned when sex is weaponized against folks, particularly women, and they're punished for having a sexual relationship. I do think it was a lapse in judgment to have a relationship with a staffer. I mean, I think the power imbalance is why we don't do it. But I do think we have to address this invasion of her privacy and this using the media to harm her, and that any media outlet, like you said, would publish those pictures, I think is even more egregious, because that's not journalistic. There is no value here. It was just to shame. And the fact that she's having a relationship with a woman, I think, is the other part of this that people have not talked a lot about. I mean, the male staffer was one thing, but the fact that she is admitting to a relationship with a woman is another thing, and I don't think we've had a very robust conversation
too about this, which is the Mail and Red State. These guys could have just been like, the text messages prove a relationship with a staffer, which violates the Me Too rules that were put in the House Ethics Committee, that you had an inappropriate relationship. I think it was egregious to publish those photos. You're exactly right. It was a leering aspect, and it was a jockeying to get traffic. Maybe they were within their rights to do it, but that doesn't mean that you should be doing it.
So I actually think all of the reports on the story were poorly handled. What made me incredibly uncomfortable was the text messages that Red State published. I was deeply uncomfortable with some of that stuff. I thought it could have just been reported without us having to see these. I was very uncomfortable with it. Now, there was this element, and this is why I hate Twitter, but the story started as kind of a joke, right? Because there was a throuple involved, and et cetera, et cetera. It's actually turned out to be deeply sad. I mean, Katie Hill is not okay. We should all be praying that she gets better and that district gets good representation. But this story was just sad from the beginning, and the people who were reporting it should have understood how.
Well, and here's what I think is, look, you're absolutely right. Lapse in judgment. 100% not a good idea to be sleeping with your staffer, right? I think there's a broader conversation about
staffer too.
Young staffer and power type,
and paying her thousands of dollars.
All of that. But you have essentially enabled, these news outlets have enabled abuse of this woman. Absolutely. I mean, this is incredibly traumatic. And I say this as a person who had much milder private photos published. But to be in the public eye like that, to have your clothes literally ripped off in the public square, and to have enabled what appears to have been the abusive husband to completely shame her and force her to resign, I just think it's horrible.
It was a crime, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. It's not just an invasion. We're talking about a crime, and that the media helped legitimize a crime, right?
And I know that California is going to be looking into this, because I think there's a revenge porn laws on the books, but they have to prove. Basically, it's very complicated because this did involve a public figure and it allowed, political scandal. Like we said, Emily, I think the text messages alone, you could have reported. Any news outlet would have reported those text messages. Any legitimate news outlet. would have
I
reported
didn't like the
this relationship.
screenshots of like 10 of these text messages where you see her mentally unraveling in front of you. I mean, this is stuff she's clearly not okay when she's sending these text messages.
And the reports of she was out drinking late at night, missing flights. I mean, look, she's having a personal crisis.
There's a reporting and a job we have to do, and then there's the rest, which is this kind of tabloid fodder. It's salacious, right? And that's the part that people want. It was a reality show, but this is somebody's real life. And I mean, unfortunately, it's going to take her a very long time probably to recover, not just her reputation, but her own mental health and well-being.
Yes, it's lurid, and most of the people who are moralizing on this are freaking hypocrites. We're going to have more with Team Rising after a quick break.